Certainly in poor communities and communities of color across this country, people have been facing this reality for years and years, where urban areas in the United States are effectively war zones, and night raids are a part of daily life just as they are in Kandahar, Afghanistan. And you know, when you combine that with the privatization of certain law enforcement functions and a paramilitarization of the U.S.-Mexico border, everything is being militarized. This Tsarnaev kid in Boston, you know, who's in custody in connection with the marathon bombing. Some of the Republicans wanted him treated as an enemy combatant. They wanted him sent to Guantanamo, despite the fact that he's a U.S. citizen. There's this knee-jerk military reaction to things, to crises, and that's something we really have to confront in our society. But it really threatens our democratic existence, I think, when everything becomes a paramilitary solution. It's a very, very serious problem. Yeah. We'll go to the other side. Yeah. You pick someone because I can't see what the light is. We should also make an effort to get back to the back.
Thank you, Mr. Scahill, for speaking today. I was wondering, I heard a report this morning that the CIA said, at least says it's going to transfer its drone program to the Pentagon. Yeah, I heard that on Democracy Now! This morning. And I was wondering that the lack of a public explanation, which Obama says he will give, about the drone program, to what extent that's covering up internecine struggles and turf wars between the CIA and the Pentagon, for instance, in the White House, and to what extent it's just, I think as other questions have said, a war machine that no longer considers itself to be bound by, even vaguely, by the rule of law.
Right, so what you're referring to, this has been talked about for some time. It's sort of, I mean, really, in reality, what I think is that this is sort of a dog and pony show, that John Brennan, you know, they talk about John Brennan like he's a priest, you know, they compare, he's like St. Augustine, and he's just toiling over, I mean, if you go and look into this later, it's incredible, like all these articles talking about how he and Obama are basically like these monks, you know, running the drone program. And Brennan, you know, and so Brennan, you know, part of the sort of dog and pony show is Brennan. Of course, Brennan couldn't become CIA director when Obama first tried to nominate him because Democrats actually stood up and said, we don't want a guy who praised torture to be Obama's director of CIA. And then years later, it's just Rand Paul and the Crazy Parade opposing him, which shows you how far we've come. And then Brennan's saying, well, we're going to move the drone program over to the military because there's greater transparency. The whole thing, first of all, the military has been running a parallel drone program for the duration of what's been called the War on Terror. In Pakistan, JSOC, the Joint Special Operations Command, operates drones. In Yemen, they already operate drones. So it's intended to sort of give the perception that something is being done, that they're listening to the public. But in reality, it's going to continue business as usual. And, some people are under the misperception that the military cannot do a covert action, that it's only the CIA. JSOC does covert actions every day around the globe. So, you know, I'm not saying that it's not quite that it makes, you know, no difference whatsoever. I actually think it could make it worse, have less oversight. You know, there are some actual tough questioners on the Intelligence Committee in the House. The Senate Armed Services Committee on these issues has largely been a rubber stamp operation for these covert actions. So, you know, I think really it's kind of propaganda. It's meant to make it look like something's happening when in reality it's just a, you know, old wine in a new bottle. Yeah, in the back.
Hi, Dustin. Hi, Jeremy. Thanks for coming. I really respect you a lot. I've been listening to your work and reading your articles, but I wouldn't be doing my job as a human being if I didn't correct you on your word for we, because I certainly didn't bomb Anwar and al-Awlaki. I didn't send any of these drones over to Pakistan, so respectfully, I'd like to correct you on that.
So you're tax resistant?
Well, I'm certainly an aggressive military resistor.
So you don't pay taxes?
I'm working on it.
Okay, but when you're going to confront me about my use of the word we, you know why let me defend myself then. Why I use the word we is I think if we don't all realize that if we're complicit in this, then we're whistling past the graveyard. We are deeply complicit.
I respect that.
Move your hand.
I respect that.
But I admire your spirit.
I'll ruin this fucking video.
What woke you up to this?
By the way, people see his t-shirt says not a terrorist. I'm glad you clarified that. Can someone remove him for asking me a tough question?
Don't tase me, bro.
When someone disrupts their speech, then they say, what is the
Don't
First Amendment
tase
great?
me,
Now the
bro.
exit's right there to throw it
Why
out.
don't you get tased, man?
Look, you said what woke me up to this. I mean,
Don't tase me, bro.
I remember hearing Amy Goodman on the radio for the first time, and I wanted to be a teacher. That's what I was studying. I've never taken a journalism class in my life, and I heard Amy Goodman on the radio, and I said, I want to do that, and so I started stalking her, and, in a non-creepy way. I started writing her letters and asking if she had a cat, I'll feed her cat or walk her dog or wash her windows, and she eventually had to decide whether to get a restraining order against me or let me come and volunteer. So I started off in radio and learned it as a trade, as an apprentice, like the way a plumber or electrician. And my early work, what I started off doing, one of the first trips I took was to Iraq in the 90s. I went in with this group called Voices in the Wilderness, which is now called Voices for Creative Nonviolence, and they were symbolically breaking the sanctions on Iraq by bringing in medical supplies that had been banned by the U.S. From bringing into Iraq, and it opened my eyes. I couldn't believe what was being done in our name. And I wasn't an investigative reporter at all. I was a kid with a tape recorder, and much of what I did was just go and ask people to tell me their stories, and then I tried to edit it into cogent narratives so we could say, well, here's this person, this mother who's in a hospital in Basra, and she's just given birth to a baby that has a gaping hole that stretches from nose to the throat, and the doctors are saying that it's a result of the munitions that were used during the Gulf War that had depleted uranium in them. And so much of my early work as a journalist was about listening to people who lived on the other side of the barrel of the gun, and I never looked back. I said that's what I wanted to do, and I felt like it was so important for people in this country to have names and faces on the other side of the story, and that's what's driven me. I mean, and there's so many people that I think about every day that I met along the way that humble me, and the journalist who I told you about that exposed that U.S. missile strike, Abdullah Shaya, he's in prison in Yemen right now, in part because President Obama is keeping him there. He was convicted on trumped-up charges of being a member of Al-Qaeda in a court set up by the dictator of Yemen to prosecute journalists for crimes against the state. And when the president of Yemen was going to pardon him, news leaked in the Yemeni media that this was going to happen. And President Obama that day called the dictator of Yemen. He personally called him and said that the U.S. wants him to remain in prison. And that journalist, he's been in prison for 3 years. And he was a well-known journalist who did work for the Washington Post, ABC News, Al Jazeera, and was a fiercely independent guy who was very critical of Al-Qaeda and did tough interviews with the leaders of Al-Qaeda. He was a real journalist. He's in prison because of our constitutional law professor president. And so you ask me why I do what I do. I mean, if you look at my book is dedicated to journalists imprisoned for telling the truth and those who die in pursuit of the truth. And then the last line of my book is that Abdullah Shaya, this Yemeni journalist, should be set free. And so, I mean, I try to do my work in the spirit of unfamous journalists who don't get invited to give speeches that are broadcast on C-SPAN or don't get to go on the Rachel Maddow show or whatever. Those are my heroes, the people that keep me going.
I have a quick question with probably a long answer. Can you tell us something about what your investigations have shown as to Israel's involvement in dirty wars, drone wars, a producer of drones and so on?
Yeah, I mean, Israel was a trendsetter with this for the U.S. I mean, the Israelis, the Israeli model, with these assassination ops, really is what the U.S. based its program on. And Israel and the United States are deep in bed together in all sorts of covert actions around the world. And of course, the U.S. Gives tremendous military support to the Israelis. I would recommend that people watch this film, if you haven't seen it, called The Gatekeepers, which is interviews with former heads of the Shin Bet. And I mean, it's a flawed movie, but it's an important movie, and I think it's definitely worth seeing, where these guys describe sort of the people that were running the kill program in Israel kind of describe how they saw it playing out and what the actual end result of it has been. And there's some pretty sobering remarks that they make in that. But I mean, Israel and the fact that it possesses hundreds of nuclear weapons that no one's allowed to talk about. When a scientist, Mordecai Vanunu, blew the whistle on the nuclear program, they put him in prison and drove him insane. And the United States won't ever talk about Israel's nuclear program. There's a reason why other countries in that region want nuclear weapons. It's as a deterrence against Israel. And I think if there's going to be an attack on Iran, it's going to be an Israeli-led attack. I think there's a lot of reason to suspect that Israel has been involved with the assassination of these Iranian nuclear scientists. I don't know that anything has been definitively proven, but someone's certainly killing Iranian nuclear scientists, and Israel certainly has taken the most belligerent stance toward Iran. So, you know, Israel is engaged in its own dirty wars. It doesn't even need the United States to tell it what to do. It certainly is deep into its own actions. Yeah. Oh, really? Oh, okay. Oh, let me just say, I'm happy to, even if people don't want to buy a book, when I do the books, I'm happy to talk to people. You just have to get in line with everyone else, but I'd be happy to, if you didn't get a chance to ask your question, to do it. So I don't know where my Phil and Philippa Donahue are, but they
I feel that the people that came here today are equally outraged by what you've reported, but I also sense that not many people are surprised because we've been inundated with reports of, as someone else mentioned earlier, the military-industrial complex abusing their powers and the extensions of that. So my question to you is, looking on the legacy of Oliver Stone and other people before you who have tried to blow the whistle, do you really feel that it's an issue of information that's not getting out? Or do we just need experts like you to actually run for political office to make change?
do you not on your life, brother. I appreciate it. I have way too many skeletons in my closet. No, I mean, look, to take your question seriously, I do think that unless we break the duopoly, you know, unless we have an actual multi-party system in this country, we're not going to get anywhere with the Democratic and Republican parties. I mean, their agenda is to support big business and to keep sort of the idea that America is the exception in the world. That's a requirement to be president of the United States. So, you know, I think I really admire people, particularly on a local level, who try to organize third-party challenges to Democrats and Republicans, because I think it's the most democratic thing you could do, is to try to fight actually to break the stranglehold that the two parties have, particularly when it comes to the national security state. You know, there are differences in domestic policy between Democrats and Republicans. When it comes to the national security state, they're the war party, period. And so I mean, I'm glad you raised it, and maybe there's young people in this room that are going to try to run for those offices and get involved at the school board level, the city council level, because I actually think that you can have change there. That and confronting corporate money, those aren't the issues that I cover, but those are the issues that I care about personally as someone in this country, and in my personal life, those are issues that I work on, and along with trying to end the death penalty. So I thank you all very much for coming. Thank you for coming.